Imagine a library without walls. A library that holds every memory, every thought, every event that has ever occurred, and every possibility that might yet unfold. A place where time is not a line but a still, open field, where past, present, and future rest together in quiet. This idea has a name whispered by ancient sages, the Akashic records. Tonight we will travel beyond ordinary explanation. We will move gently through stories and symbols, through the hush of meditation and the clarity of modern inquiry. Whether you approach this as myth, metaphor, or a door to new possibility, allow curiosity to be your companion. Find a comfortable posture now. Let your breath slow, deep in and out. Over the next hour, we will touch ancient wisdom, listen to scientific ideas about information and connection, and take a simple, guided exploration into an imagined library of light. There is nothing to prove here, only to notice, to listen, and to be present. When you are ready, let the mind soften, and let us begin. Imagine the earliest listeners, people who watched the sky and felt the pull of seasons, who learned the language of wind and rain, of birds and river. Long before laboratories and telescopes, their lives depended on pattern recognition. Out of that listening arose a way of speaking about memory not as an object kept in a chest, but as a field, a pervading presence that holds what has been and what may yet be. In South Asia, this subtle medium was named Akasha, the space in which sound, vibration, and possibility arise. Akasha was not a material to be owned. It was an expanse to be heard. Picture a sage beneath a banyan tree. He sits with a slow breath, eyes softened, attention withdrawn from gossip and commerce. In that stillness, sound and silence feel like two faces of a single surface. The sage speaks of tuning an inner ear, a cultivation that allows impressions to be received that do not belong to his personal history. These impressions arise as vibration, the sense of a landscape, the echo of a vanished song, the color of an emotion. To read the world's memory, the sage says, is to learn a language of resonance, where attention itself becomes the measuring instrument. Far to the west, in the Nile's shadow and the Hellenistic courts, another set of images evolved. Hermetic writers spoke of cosmic correspondences, an ordered archive of meaning encoded in symbol and proportion. The Egyptians carved metaphor into stone, encoding cycles of death and revival, meaning that could be reanimated through ritual and image. In the Jewish mystical tradition, Kabbalists described layers of manifestation, the Sphirot, the hidden pathways through which intention expresses itself. These teachings do not imagine a bureaucratic ledger stored in a distant vault. Their maps describe structure and relationship, how intention, action, and consequence loop through levels of being. Tibetan contemplatives offer a different but related image, the clear light, the luminous ground of mind visible when ordinary mental chatter thins. In descriptions of the Bardo, transitional states of consciousness are populated by archetypal landscapes and luminous displays, experiences that feel like encounters with memory and meaning beyond the individual life. Indigenous peoples across continents have their own idioms, land that remembers, songs that carry lineage, dances that awaken ancestral presence. In these practices, memory is not merely recalled, it is embodied and enacted. A song revives a story, a ritual reactivates a relationship with place. Notice what these accounts share, an experiential claim that human consciousness, when refined by practice, can access information not produced by ordinary episodic memory. The methods vary: chant, mantra, prolonged meditation, repetitive ritual, humming, drumming, or dance, but they share a functional similarity. Each practice quiets habitual distraction and steadies attention. In modern terms, these techniques increase the signal-to-noise ratio of perception. Interior chatter softens, allowing subtler impressions to register with clarity. Symbols recur across many cultures. The world tree whose roots and branches join realms, the golden thread that binds stories through generations, the the mandala that maps inner and outer space. Such motifs may be cultural expressions of shared human cognitive patterns, or they may point toward recurring informational structures that human minds habitually translate into pictorial language. The repetition itself matters. When widely separated cultures converge on similar metaphors, it suggests certain ways of organizing experience resonate deeply with the human capacity to notice pattern. Stories of seers and mystics usually exhibit humility. The one who reads the records is not a figure of command, but a receptive instrument. The image is not of extraction, but of attunement, aligning one's frequency with subtler textures until an impression arises that can be witnessed and named. This is not a claim to omniscience. It is a discipline of attention, cultivated through practice, sustained by community, and refined by ritual. The person who sees is often described as someone who listens well, who has learned patience and restraint. Ritual deserves close attention because it functions as embodied cognition. Repetition and rhythm shape the nervous system. Symbolic action externalizes memory and encodes it in gesture, sound, and communal attention. A repeated chant is not simply a phrase. It becomes a vessel that carries a landscape of meaning across time. A dance can preserve the contours of a story with greater fidelity than a sentence. In this sense, cultures build living archives through practice, songs, rites, and ceremonies that make knowledge transmissible beyond any individual lifetime. These practices also shape collective attention. When a community gathers to tell a story or perform a rite, they coordinate their perceptual frames. This coordination creates a shared field in which memory is not only stored but reanimated. The archive, then, is not a solitary repository but a dynamic commons, a mesh of embodied practices that both record and renew the world's meanings. It is helpful to hold two attitudes at once: respectful curiosity and careful skepticism. Ancient descriptions are not scientific demonstrations, nor are they naive fantasies. They are rich phenomenological reports, disciplined observations of interior states, encoded in poetic languages. Taken on their own terms, they offer methods and metaphors for encountering dimensions of life that instruments may not easily measure. Paired with modern inquiry, they invite complementary questions. What if disciplined attention reliably reveals information not ordinarily accessible? What if ritual and practice function as reliable protocols for perception? Consider, for a moment, the image of threads connecting orbs of light in a vast field. Each orb might hold a memory, a song, a story. Threads mark relationship, cause and effect, lineage, resonance. Some threads glow brightly, their patterns easily perceived. Others are thin and dim, requiring long attention to follow. The practice of meditation, chant, or ceremony is the work of learning which threads to trace, and how to trace them without disturbing the weave. Above all, these traditions emphasize an ethic of care. If memory extends beyond the individual, then how we live, the actions we take, the stories we tell, the customs we pass, becomes a form of stewardship. To inscribe the world with care is to tend an archive in which future lives will read the traces we leave. The imagery of shared memory invites us to act with gentleness, humility, and responsibility. Hold this chapter with a sense of reverence and inquiry. We have moved through images and practices that imagine memory as field and relationship. In the next part, we will translate some of these metaphors into the language of modern science: fields, information, and pattern. For now, let the sense of the banyan's shade and the slow pulse of attentive breath remain with you, like a soft bell in the quiet. Imagine we change languages for a while. Where the sages used metaphor and ritual, modern inquiry uses measurement and model. The questions are similar. How does the world hold pattern, and how do minds access meaning? In this part, we will walk slowly through some of the ideas science offers, not as final answers, but as fresh metaphors and precise observations that resonate with the ancient images you have just heard. Begin with a foundational shift in perspective. The 20th century taught us to think of the universe not primarily as solid things, but as relations and information. At the scale of the very small, particles behave like probabilities until they are observed. Processes that seemed separate become entangled, linked in such a way that the state of one depends on the state of another, regardless of distance. This feature, quantum entanglement, startled scientists because it suggested a depth of connection that defied ordinary intuition. Entangled systems do not simply interact once and separate. They remain correlated in ways that appear to transcend simple locality. From this discovery emerged a new way of speaking about information. Physicists began to treat information as a conserved quantity, something that is transformed but not arbitrarily destroyed. If matter can change form, information about that matter persists in some traceable way. This idea plays a crucial role in contemporary puzzles. For example, what happens to information that falls into a black hole? The debates that followed forced physicists to treat information as a central player in the rules of reality. Related to this is an idea called the holographic principle. It is a technical concept, but its simplest poetic meaning is this. Under certain conditions, the information describing a volume of space can be encoded on its boundary. Think of a three-dimensional room whose essential data, the structure of its contents and relationships, could be represented on the two-dimensional skin that encloses it. If this is true in deep ways, it suggests that the universe's apparent bulk might be an emergent expression of underlying informational relations encoded on more fundamental surfaces. The metaphor is striking, a richer reality projected from a more compact informational substrate. For our purposes, the holographic idea is not a claim that a literal library sits at the edge of space, but it does imply that information is primary, that geometry, matter, and even causality may be shaped by patterns of information. Pause briefly and let that sink in. Information as substance, patterns as the scaffolding of reality. This is the vocabulary that lets us talk about memory in new ways. If information is fundamental and conserved, then the cosmos might preserve traces of events as structured patterns. How those patterns are stored, and whether they are accessible to minds, are open questions. But the notion reframes ancient intuition. Rather than a mystical archive floating somewhere, the universe itself might already be an archive because it intrinsically encodes relationships. At the scale of organisms, neuroscience gives us a complementary picture. Brains do not store memories like files in a cabinet. Instead, memory is distributed across networks of neurons. When you remember an event, you do not retrieve a fixed recording. You reconstruct a pattern shaped by current context, emotion, and prior experiences. Memory is dynamic, a living process that rewrites its own traces as it is accessed. This reconstructive nature is often surprising. The very act of remembering can make the memory different. Yet despite this fluidity, the brain reliably encodes sequences, spatial maps, and associative webs that allow individuals and cultures to transmit knowledge across time. Consider the way information flows through neural networks. Electrical impulses and chemical signals form patterns of activation. These patterns reinforce certain connections, weakening others. Repetition strengthens particular pathways. Attention focuses resources on particular circuits. Practices like rehearsal, storytelling, ritual repetition. These are precisely the cultural mechanisms that stabilize patterns in the brain and in social systems. In this light, ritual becomes not only symbolic but also cognitive, an external technology for shaping internal architecture. Repeated songs, ceremonies, and narratives serve to reenact patterns until they become embodied knowledge. Now return to the larger scale. In complex systems, ecosystems, weather patterns, planetary processes, information is carried in structure. A coral reef's form, a river's meander, a forest's seasonal pulse. Each encodes history in persistent patterns. The notion of memory broadens. Memory is not only in minds, but in matter shaped by time. Geology, biology, and culture are all ways the world records its past. If information persists in structures, then to some degree the past is written into the present in patterns we can read with suitable tools. This brings us to a careful, cautious place: the role of quantum phenomena in consciousness. A number of researchers have proposed mechanisms by which quantum coherence or entanglement could play a role in cognitive processes. Some suggest that microstructures in neurons might support quantum states. Others speculate that entangled states could underlie non-local aspects of cognition. These hypotheses are enticing because they might bridge the explanatory gap between subjective experience and physical process. Yet it is important to acknowledge the controversy. The brain is warm, wet, and noisy, conditions typically hostile to delicate quantum coherence. Most neuroscientists remain unconvinced that quantum processes are central to ordinary cognitive function. The current state of knowledge is speculative, not settled. Still, the idea persists because it offers a conceptual bridge between the interconnectedness observed in physics and the unity observed in subjective experience. Even without invoking quantum consciousness, however, there are productive ways to think about mind and world as continuously interacting. The brain is an organ that both predicts and interprets. It minimizes surprise by constructing models of the environment. Perception is not passive reception, but active inference. In that sense, minds are constantly generating hypotheses about the world and then entraining patterns when those hypotheses prove adaptive. Memory, attention, and prediction form a loop. Each moment of perception updates the model and leaves traces that shape future expectations. From this perspective, practices that alter attention, meditation, chanting, ritual, are not mystical curiosities, but ways of modifying the brain's inferential dynamics. Extended attention stabilizes certain models, making subtle patterns more available to consciousness. When the internal noise quiets, weaker signals, small patterns of resonance, faint associations, peripheral connections, may rise to awareness. The effect is not magic. It is a shift in the brain's operating point that allows different information to be processed and integrated. Information theory also gives us a vocabulary for thinking about persistence and loss. Entropy, roughly speaking, is a measure of disorder or uncertainty. Systems evolve toward states that maximize entropy unless work is done to maintain order. Memory requires energy. Maintaining structured records, whether in neural tissue, cultural practice, or technological storage, demands resources. This simple observation has moral and practical implications. The endurance of memory depends on care. Societies that invest in rituals, archives, education, and conservation are, in effect, applying energy to preserve patterns against the tide of entropy. Another scientific insight worth noting is that of emergent phenomena. Complex behaviors and properties arise from interactions among simpler elements. Consciousness may be an emergent property of neural networks in just this way, not reducible to any single neuron, but arising from patterns across many. Likewise, a global memory might emerge from the complex interactions of many systems: ecological, cultural, technological. Here, emergentist thinking invites humility. Even when we map local interactions precisely, the global pattern can surprise us. Emergence frees us from both naive reductionism and grandiose mysticism. Complex memory-like patterns can exist without requiring a single, centralized repository. Through all this, a steady theme emerges: pattern matters. Whether in entangled particles or in nested neural networks, the form and relation of information, how it is organized, transmitted, and transformed, determines what persists and what fades. This is a bridge to the ancient image of the Akashic records. The sages described a field because they perceived pattern and relationship. Modern science describes fields and information because it measures pattern and relation. The two vocabularies are different, but they converge on a shared intuition. The world is not merely a collection of isolated things. It is an ongoing web of information, and that web carries the traces of what has happened. Finally, it is crucial to hold two temperaments together: openness to possibility and rigorous skepticism. Speculative ideas can inspire new experiments and new metaphors, but they must be tested. Until evidence accumulates, we should treat claims about cosmic records or quantum minds as intriguing hypotheses, not established fact. At the same time, the convergence of metaphor and measure, the echo between ancient intuitions and modern insights, invites respectful curiosity. If the universe does conserve and structure information in ways we can perceive and influence, then our practices, both cultural and personal, matter more than we often assume. As we move toward the next part, keep the image of information as texture. Picture entanglement as subtle stitching, neural patterns as living embroidery, and ritual as a method of reweaving. We will next explore how these scientific ideas and the ancient metaphors might be bridged in practical, ethical, and experiential ways. How one might live as a steward of pattern in a world that remembers. Now we come to the place where two languages meet, the poetic, experiential language of tradition and the precise, model-based language of science. Both offer ways to describe pattern, relation, and persistence. Both point toward practices that alter how we perceive and what endures. In this section, we will weave these threads together, not to conflate myth and measurement, but to show how each can illuminate the other and how both suggest practical ways to live with attention. Begin with metaphor as method. Ancient accounts used rich images, a library of light, threads that bind lives, a clear, luminous ground of mind, because metaphor maps complex experience into a form the heart can hold. Modern science uses equations, diagrams, and experiments to isolate variables and test hypotheses. These are different tools for knowing, yet their goals overlap: to reveal structure, to make surprising relations intelligible, and to guide action. When metaphors and models echo one another, we gain an invitation. Test the practice that the metaphor recommends and measure its effects. So the first bridge is methodological humility, the willingness to let poetry suggest experiments and to let data refine our metaphors. Consider how contemplative practices function from both vantage points. A chant, a slow breath, a repeated gesture. In myth, these are ways of tuning. In scientific terms, they are signal processing techniques. Repetition reduces novelty. Rhythm entrains physiology. Focused attention dampens internal noise. The nervous system shifts into a state in which weaker, more subtle patterns become perceptible. In that state, experiences that were previously drowned out by agitation or distraction can be noticed and integrated. This is a concrete mechanism underlying reports from seers and meditators. Sustained attention changes the brain's dynamics and opens different registers of perception. Symbols also serve as translation devices. An archetypal image, the tree, the thread, the circle, is not merely decorative. It condenses relational information into a form that the embodied mind can navigate. When we gaze at a mandala, for instance, we are not decoding a literal map. We are engaging a pattern that organizes attention, memory, and meaning. Neuroscience shows how the brain prefers patterns and compresses information. Symbols work because they are concise encodings of relational structure. They allow communities to pass complex instructions across generations with minimal loss. In that way, symbolism is an efficient technology of memory. This leads naturally to ethics. If memory is distributed, woven into structures, practices, and relationships, then our actions contribute to the archive. To speak of a commons of memory is to insist that what we do today is legible to those who follow. Consider the difference between a culture that preserves stories with care and one that discards them. The first invests resources in rituals, education, and archiving. It repeatedly reenacts values so they are embodied. The second allows knowledge to dissipate. The sciences explain why this matters. Maintaining structured memory requires energy and effort. Ritual and technology are ways of allocating that energy toward preservation. Thus, stewardship becomes a moral practice, tending narratives, repairing relationships, and keeping the signal clear for those who will inherit the field. There is also a humility built into both traditions. Ancient practices often emphasize restraint. The reader of records is not a possessor, but a servant of what appears. Science, too, cautions against overreach. Models are provisional, data are subject to interpretation, and extraordinary claims require robust evidence. Holding these two temperaments together, curiosity and skepticism, openness and rigor, is itself a practice. It prevents both credulity and closed-mindedness. It allows us to explore with wonder while demanding clarity about what remains hypothesis and what is demonstrable. Let us speak about practices you can use to enact this bridge in your own life. The first is intentional attention. Twice a day, for a few minutes, practice simply noticing the flow of your breath. This is not meditation for transcendence so much as calibration. By returning the mind repeatedly to a single, neutral signal, you train the cognitive system to filter noise and to stabilize patterns. The second practice is ritualization of memory. Create a simple ritual to honor something you want to remember. A short verse, a mindful act of placing a stone, a recorded story you re-listen to each month. These small, repeated acts are like committing a file to durable storage. They allocate energy and make the trace more robust. Another practice is symbol work. Identify an image that resonates with a life theme. A tree for rootedness, a river for change, a lamp for guidance. Use that symbol in moments when you need orientation. Draw it, gaze at an image of it, or imagine it in breath practice. Over time, the symbol becomes a compressed instruction set for your attention, a quick way to recalibrate toward desired patterns. Community practices amplify individual effort. Shared rituals synchronize attention across many minds, reinforcing patterns through multiple channels: speech, movement, and shared effect. Communities that cultivate careful attention create collective memory fields that are more resilient than any single person's recollection. This is why storytelling circles, commemorations, and cultural rites matter beyond sentiment. They are mechanisms for sustaining shared models and values. There are also practical cautions. Pattern seeking can slip into pattern imposing. The human brain loves coherence and may see intentional design where there is merely coincidence. This is where scientific rigor helps. Encourage tests, seek disconfirming evidence, be willing to revise interpretations. Practices that claim access to global archives should be tested against consistent outcomes. Does the practice reliably produce meaningful insights across practitioners? Are the insights useful, ethical, and verifiable in some independent sense? Asking such questions protects us from illusion while preserving genuine inquiry. What might a responsible ethos look like if we accept even a modest form of distributed memory? First, humility. Assume you do not possess the whole story. Second, stewardship. Invest attention and care in the narratives you pass on. Third, reciprocity. Acknowledge that our memories are entangled with others. Acts of remembrance should include listening to those whose stories have been neglected. Finally, experimentation. Treat practices as hypotheses to be tested with both subjective care and intersubjective verification. In practical terms, this could mean combining reflective practice with communal action. A weekly circle of reflection where participants speak briefly about a memory and then perform a short, repeatable gesture to anchor it. This is both an archive and a laboratory. Combine this with simple data. Note whether participants feel changes in mood, recall, or relational trust over time. Such small, iterative experiments honor both ancient wisdom and scientific method. As we bring this section to a close, hold the image of weaving. Threads of attention pulled by many hands, patterns forming and reforming, some threads bright with repeated care and others thin where neglect has frayed them. The work is not to prove that a cosmic ledger exists in some metaphysical storage room. The work is to learn practices that increase clarity, community, and care, to recognize that our lives are threads with consequences, and to cultivate an ethic that preserves what matters. In the next part, we will enter a guided exploration that lets you practice some of these ideas experientially. a short journey into the imagined library, using attention, symbol, and ritual to tune your perception. For now, notice how it feels to hold science and story together, two ways of attending to pattern that, when balanced, invite both insight and responsibility. Begin by settling into a comfortable posture. Allow your body to be supported. Soften your shoulders. Let your hands rest easily. Take a slow, deliberate breath in and release it fully. Breathe again, slowly, and feel the weight of the body meeting whatever holds you. As your breath finds a gentle rhythm, imagine yourself lifting away from immediate concerns. There is no hurry here. With each exhale, let tension soften. With each inhale, invite calm. Allow the space around you to widen inwardly, as if a quiet room opens inside your chest. Now picture ahead of you a vast field of dim light. The field is gentle and expansive, a library without walls. Orbs of light float like lanterns, each humming with a subtle tone. Some are warm, amber and close. Some are cool, pale and distant. Threads of fine, luminous connection run between them, drifting like filaments of silk. You move slowly through this field, buoyed by sensation more than motion. As you approach, choose an orb that draws your attention, not the brightest, not the closest, but the one whose presence feels right to notice now. Allow your attention to be the hand that reaches. There is no need to know why you chose this orb. Curiosity is enough. Move toward it with a soft, open awareness. Bring your awareness to the surface of the orb. Notice its color, its temperature in your mind's perception, the quality of its tone. It may feel like warmth, like a scent, like a distant song. Receive whatever impression arises without interpretation. If an image appears, let it be an image. If a feeling arises, let it be a feeling. You are a witness to what shifts in the field. If something feels intense, breathe with it. Inhale slowly, and on the exhale, allow the intensity to soften, as if colors spread thinner and become easier to view. Remember, you are safe. You are simply observing. There is no need to hold or to fix anything. Allow impressions to move through your awareness like clouds across an open sky. Now notice a thin thread extending from the orb you touched. Follow that thread with your attention, like tracing a silver line through space. See where it leads. Does it arc toward another orb, sink deep into a denser cluster, or stretch far across the field? Keep following. Allow the thread to reveal connections, perhaps a pattern of emotion, a repeated scene, or a sequence of images. Let meaning arise slowly, if it chooses to come. As you follow the thread, notice the quality of connection. Is it bright and steady, or faint and wavering? Some threads carry clear lineage. Others whisper of distant resonance. You do not need to judge. Simply observe how threads knit moments together, and how a single action can ripple outward into many places. Gently return now to the orb you first entered. Sense its fullness again. If you wish, invite a small personal memory to join the field, a moment that matters to you. Simple and ordinary, a laugh with someone, a morning light on a table, a quiet kindness received. Imagine that memory as a smaller orb, warm and familiar, and place it beside the one you came to visit. Notice how it feels to situate your own memory within the larger weave. Listen for the subtle exchange between these lights. Sometimes an orb will echo another's tone, and a small harmony will form. Sometimes your memory will remain distinct. Allow whatever happens to happen without needing to interpret it. This is practice, to let personal recollection exist within a field larger than the self. Now look slightly upward and allow a symbol to arise, a shape that carries meaning for you. It might be a tree, a circle, a river, a lamp, or something entirely unique. Do not choose. Simply notice what appears. Observe its color, texture, motion. Let the symbol expand until it fills a gentle portion of your awareness. Bring this symbol close to the orb that contains your personal memory. See whether the symbol sheds light on the memory's edges, clarifying a pattern or revealing a gentle lesson. Symbols act like keys. They simplify complexity into a navigable pattern. Let whatever emerges remain without pressure. Begin now to gather your impressions with kindness. There is no requirement to remember precise details. Notice only the tone that lingers, warmth, curiosity, release, or a subtle shift in perspective. Allow these qualities to condense into a single steady light within your chest, as if the library's ambient glow has left a trace inside you. Sense the threads you followed retracting gently into the field, their patterns remaining intact though you step away. Know that you may return to them whenever you wish. Slowly bring your attention back to breath. Feel the inhale move into the body and the exhale release into space. When you feel ready, let the image of the library soften. Keep the internal trace you gathered, the small light in your chest, and let it accompany you. Remember that the practice is not an achievement, but an invitation to notice, to listen, and to act with care. Take one last full breath now, deep in, and slow out. Wiggle your fingers and toes if you like. When you open your eyes, bring the quieted attention with you. Carry this sense of connection gently into whatever follows. You may return to this library anytime. Each visit is practice. Each visit refines the way you hold memory, both yours and the world's. When you are ready, continue with your day or rest in the quiet that remains. Imagine the light of the library settling gently as you bring your attention back to ordinary awareness. Notice the small residue of quiet that remains, a color, a tone, a soft warmth in the chest. There is no need to analyze it. Let it be a gentle companion as we reflect together on what this hour has offered. We began with an image, a field of light, orbs of memory, threads of relation. That image is both a story and a tool. As a story, it helps us hold something vast without shrinking it to a single sentence. As a tool, it gives us ways to practice, ways to attend, to listen, and to act with care. Whether you have experienced vivid impressions or only a faint sense of calm, the invitation is the same, to notice how attention shapes what endures. Consider for a moment the two temperaments we have kept company with here, curiosity and care. Curiosity asks questions and explores possibility. Care asks what we are making of what we discover. In ancient traditions, the reader of records was often portrayed not as a ruler, but as a steward. That image matters because it reminds us that acting on insight carries responsibility. If our lives leave traces beyond ourselves, in stories, in relationships, in the shape of our communities, then tending those traces becomes a moral art. Modern inquiry gives us a complementary caution. Science teaches us to test, to seek converging evidence, and to hold claims lightly until verified. It reminds us that wonderfully suggestive metaphors are not the same as empirically established facts. Yet the echo between metaphor and measurement is meaningful. When poets and physicists both speak of pattern and information, we have reason to listen to both with respect. They are different languages addressing overlapping features of the same landscape. Hold also the practical lesson of practice. Ritual, repetition, and focused attention do more than produce mystical experiences. They change the nervous system and shape the social field. Small repeated acts, a brief mindful pause each morning, a short ceremony to honor memory, a shared story told with care, are the work of preservation. They allocate energy toward sustaining patterns that matter. In a world where entropy quietly disperses order, such practices are acts of repair. Think now of your own daily life. Which small practices might you adopt to tend memory and care? Perhaps a simple ritual. Each evening name one small kindness you witnessed or received, and say it aloud or write it down. Perhaps a communal practice. Once a week gather with one or two people to tell a story that matters to you and listen as ritual. Perhaps a symbolic practice. Choose a small image or object that helps anchor what you want to remember and bring it into brief moments of reflection. These acts are modest, but they are cumulative. Over time, they create stronger threads in the weave of what endures. There is also a social dimension to this stewardship. Memory is not merely private. It lives in language, law, art, and landscape. To care for collective memory is to ensure that histories are told honestly, that neglected voices are heard, and that the images we pass on are chosen with humility. Stewardship asks us to repair erasures, to preserve fragile knowledge, and to resist the temptation to simplify complex stories into comforting myths that erase nuance. Let us speak briefly about doubt and discernment. Not every impression arising in meditation is a revelation. Not every evocative symbol maps to external truth. The mind can generate seductive narratives that comfort or confirm bias. Discernment asks us to test insights against experience, to invite other perspectives, and to remain open to revision. Combining contemplative practice with critical thinking creates a resilient form of inquiry, one that honors felt experience while seeking rigorous corroboration. As you prepare to move from this listening into ordinary tasks, carry one small intention with you. It might be to notice one act of kindness today, to tell one small true story with care, or to pause once to breathe with attention. Let that intention be a tiny thread you add to the larger weave. You need not transform your life in an instant. Stewardship is patient work. It accumulates in quiet increments. Remember, too, that returning is part of practice. The Library of Light is not a one-time spectacle, but a place you can revisit. Each visit refines your capacity to notice and to care. Over time, the habit of returning alters perception. Details that once slipped by may come into view. Relationships may reveal new patterns. Old memories may soften or clarify. Practice is not mastery. It is a sustained apprenticeship in attention. Finally, hold a sense of humility about what you have seen and felt. Whether the images you encountered are metaphors, psychological processes, or pointers to deeper structures of the world, they can all serve a good purpose when used with ethical intent. Let what you carry be tempered by kindness and responsibility. Let curiosity remain partnered with care. When you are ready, take a full breath and feel the body settling. Open your eyes if they have been closed. Move slowly, allowing the quiet you cultivated to thread through whatever follows. Carry this hour as a small light in the chest, a reminder that attention matters, that patterns persist, and that we are, each of us, woven into a larger story. If you found this journey meaningful, please consider following the channel and sharing this video with someone who might benefit. Leave your thoughts in the comments, questions, experiences, or topics you'd like us to explore next. Your reflections help shape future episodes and build a kinder, more curious community. If you'd like to support the work, check the description for links and ways to connect. Thank you for listening, for practicing, and for bringing gentle care to the memory you carry and the memory you help create.